Okay. Hello
That's
and
why
welcome to the, what is it, the 29th episode?
I don't know.
29, I think. We think. I don't know. I'll put it in the title. You'll know. Episode of the PEMpodcast, Psychic Guy Mystery Podcast, starring me and my fabulous sister, me, Victoria Laurie, my fabulous sister, Sandy, here to chat at you on this July 4th weekend. So it's beautiful here, Sans. I don't know how the weather is there, but like breathtakingly gorgeous.
I was actually going to try and move outside to the garden, and I was worried about like ambient noise, so I elected not to do that.
Well, you can do that at any time. I mean, we can try it out, and if it's like annoying, I'll tell you.
It's because it's not annoying enough with trains and birds and dogs. Like
right. No, I'm never, man, it's so quiet here. My God. You can hear a pin drop.
Maybe Bunny
and if you
will
hear
make
the pin drop,
appearance.
it's probably my bird mimicking a pin drop.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Yeah, just so you know.
And maybe baby Bunny will make an appearance while I'm out in the garden.
Yeah, maybe you can like be like, see, this was the plant destroyed by the bunny. Here's the one that I managed to keep alive, barely. I have a basil plant. That's the only thing I have is like a basil plant, and I think I'm killing it. Why is basil so freaking fragile? Right? Like why can't it just thrive in my environment? They all die.
I don't know what to tell you. I have a windowsill full of basil.
Whatever, shut up. I don't know what to tell you. I snip fresh basil every day for my dinner, and it's perfect. Like me. Audience, guess which one was the good child in the family? I know it's a stumper. We'll give you a minute to figure it out. Yeah. Oh my God, Sandy, please. The halo. I don't know what to tell you. My basil is just my herb garden on the windowsill. It's just thriving. Can't wait to grow bigger. Whatever.
Do you have a book you want to promote? I think you have a book you want to promote.
Death Perception, number 6 in the series of Abby Cooper Psychic Guy Mysteries. This one, we say it every book. This is my favorite. This is really one of my favorites. So premise really quickly, Abby is home with Dutch. They're her steady Eddie. I think by this time they've moved in together. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure they've moved in together by this time. And he gets a call that his cousin is missing. So he heads off to Las Vegas to try and find his cousin. And then he mysteriously disappears. So Abby, Candace, and Candace head out to Las Vegas and promptly get into big time trouble. And then who arrives to save the day with a bag full of cash? Abby's sister Kat. Abby's sister Kat arrives to try and save the day, and hijinks really ensue. I remember when I was writing this book, I had this idea of a chase scene taking place at a car wash, and it just was so clear in my mind kind of how that would work. And I went and did like research. So I think the first effort to escape someone was to go into a drive-through and cut in front of a car, right? And then just go up to the window and be like, oops, my bad, sorry, and then zip away while whoever was chasing them was stuck behind the car that the party fleeing, was jumped in front of. So that was one way to evade them. And then there's a whole car wash trying to evade the FBI. The bad FBI people chasing after them. And so I went and looked at a couple of car washes, and I was like, okay, I think that could actually work. So I wrote that. And it's one of my favorite scenes I've ever written still to this day. I just car wash, escape at a car wash.
Isn't this the one that has a Cooper vehicle in it?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't that what inspired you ultimately to buy a Mini Cooper?
Sans, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't.
Because I seem to recall that shortly after this book came out, you ended up like tooling around with Mini Cooper.
Honestly, I
Yeah.
always loved them. And after I bought one, I really loved them. The damn cars are just too freaking small. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You know,
I
like
agree.
I was going to the grocery store like 3 times a week because I couldn't fit freaking groceries in my car. So, now with a dog, there's no way. There's no way she could fit in that. They're comfortable and they have a BMW engine, so
They do.
they're zippy. And I loved that car.
So I
so
drove
sad
your
to hear
car
them.
once. I drove your car once in Austin when my husband and I came down to visit. We wanted to go out to dinner.
I know
and you
the
were
story.
Like,
That's why I'm
tired.
giving her a raspberry.
I'm tired. So my husband and I go off to like the local beautiful mall, have a beautiful dinner outside.
Arboretum in Austin.
Yeah. And at the time, GPS was not that stable. And
Right.
I had no idea I knew how to get there, but I had no idea how to get back to your house.
Right.
So we ended up driving along.
Came
like,
we were like, we had to pay a toll. I was like, where the fuck were you? Because there was
no
toll between the Arboretum and where I lived. I don't even know where she went.
But the toll road was not like you stop and give somebody money. This was like you're driving and then overhead it's like snap of the license plate. So all I remember is the top's down, hairs everywhere. I can't see what I'm doing. My husband's trying to grab my hair out of my face. And every time I'm like getting oriented, I hear over my head with the toll snapping. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she's going to kill me. I'm probably generating $500 worth of tolls. So
well, at least. Yeah. I had to turn the car in because I'd racked up so much into this. No, please. I don't know whatever became of that, but I never got a ticket or I never got an invoice or anything. No, zero, nothing.
Okay,
nothing.
Good. Well,
apparently you were zipping through it on my bald tires so fast that it didn't capture the
register.
But when they showed up, their eyes were like wild, like your tires are very, very bald.
And hair was everywhere.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I've been meaning to get new tires. Yeah. But I think like within 2 weeks, because you were so terrified, I was like, all right, fine. I went and you're like, it's dangerous to drive.
That is true. Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
Skidding around corners, hydroplaning. It was fun. It's Texas, whatever. So so we're gonna change things up this week because my sister has been teasing me about an anecdote that she has that she wants to share. So I'm hearing it for the first time, just like you. So Sans, what anecdote do you have?
So I am aware, since you've been doing your medium readings, that you have shared consistently that the family tree is very sacred, right?
Yeah.
And that the ancestors sort of stick together in terms of the family tree.
Right.
So I have not necessarily shared this with the audience, but on occasion I do see dead people. It's a very freaky experience. And I don't have Victoria's clairaudient capabilities, meaning like I'm not talking to them when they show up in my bedroom.
Who said I have clairaudient capabilities?
Isn't that what being a medium is being clairaudient?
It can be, yeah, but mine suck. My clairaudient ability sucks. It's more they impress upon me feelings and then they will put pictures up for me to kind of interpret. So it's a game of charades, basically.
Okay. So never mind. Anyway, about a week ago, I was asleep and I woke up and looked straight up and there was a young boy, probably between the ages of like 12 and 14, floating above the door of my bedroom. And his style of dress was very distinct. He was wearing like tweed shorts and a matching jacket. And he had a newsboy cap and he had really dark hair. I remember that being very distinct. And he had longer sideburns. Wow. And I thought, who the hell is that? And then of course I freaked out and I said, closed my eyes really tight and said many prayers to Archangel Michael to surround me in white light and, love and protection. And then opened my eyes back up and whatever visitor was there, just, wasn't there anymore. So I happen to be sharing this experience with one of my girlfriends, Susan, who we've talked about because her sister Annie passed away and she was the blue herring. Mm-hmm. And Susan said, well, what if it was like one of your grandfathers? Oh. And it was like, boom, that made total sense to me. And I realized that it was probably, my paternal grandfather. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe I'll find a picture of Sumner online. Like, come on. But I started Googling and I came across an article that was written in a local. So my our side of the family actually originated from England here in Massachusetts. They had a home, and the
Back up
ancestors
for one
sort
second
of,
though. 1 second. Let me just stop you right there. Sandy and I never met our paternal grandfather. He died
Correct.
when our father was 3 months old. So, and he died of blood poisoning, right? Septic.
no, he had a infection, a staph infection along the lining of his heart.
Mm. Didn't he cut his leg or something?
No, I don't
thought
know.
I thought the story was he cut his leg and then that got infected. That's what I thought.
Okay, so I'm not trusting any story that we've heard growing up, because what I read in this article is completely different from
Oh my
what we
God,
were
tell
told.
me. Tell me.
So,
And why haven't you sent me
so-
this article yet?
because anyway, so I'm looking up online and I come across this article that was written in the Dorchester Anthem. And the Dorchester is like a suburb, like a city suburb of Boston. And the article was written because 3 family members living in the same house in Dorchester were all drafted into World War I. And the reason I came across the article was because the 3 gentlemen all had my last name. So I'm reading on and I'm thinking, what? My grandfather's middle name was Bruce? Like, seriously?
What?
No idea. Yeah, his middle name was Bruce. No
Sumner
idea.
Bruce?
Yes.
Interesting.
So it turns out that Sumner had an older brother by 7 years, Albert, and
What?
Sumner and
uncle? I didn't know this. I'm sorry. Continue.
Sumner and Albert had a cousin, Roy. Roy and Sumner were born the same year in 1895. Okay. So Roy's parents, which would have been our grandfather's brother, both passed away and left Roy to be an orphan. Roy ended up going into a boys' home off of on an island off of the coast of Boston. Ultimately, at I think age 16, he ends up moving in with Albert and Sumner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all 3 men were drafted into World War I, into the army. And between 1917 and 1918, all 3 were deployed to Europe.
What?
Fortunately, all 3 come back from war in 1919 intact. And the article went on to describe kind of what happened to the 3 men. So Albert, the oldest brother, ended up migrating to California. Sumner ended up migrating to Michigan,
Right.
where he met our grandmother. And then I did not know this.
Yep.
No, St. Clair. Then, then migrated to Tennessee to live in Nashville for a while, and then
What?
ended up, in Kalamazoo. Okay. But Roy, this is where the story gets really kind of interesting from my vantage point. Roy stays in the Boston area, and he, as an adult, ends up going to work for a company that was one of the world's, at the time, one of the nation's largest ink producers. They made ink for newspapers and magazines and anything that was being printed. And the owner and founder of the company bore the last name of my ex-husband.
Wow.
So that kind of freaked me out a little bit. And then from there, Roy's married, has a son, and his wife passes away. So Roy, at age 40, marries a widow who has 4 children, and her married last name is the same as my husband's. And I thought,
oh my God.
It was, my husband and I were meant to be.
Oh my God.
And I was meant to have, it just freaked me out,
God.
right?
Wow.
Like the ancestral tree is consistent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sandy,
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it turns out my husband does not know of this family.
Line of the family tree. Yeah.
Line of the family tree, but that doesn't mean that, and what's really odd is that both our last name and my husband's last name are not popular names. They're actually very uncommon names. They're actually relatively unique comparatively to like a Jones or a Smith or a lot of the other Anglo-American names that are in existence today. So to me, it was really striking that he works for a family that's connected to my ex-husband's family. And then on top of that, he marries a woman that bears the last name of my husband. And it made me realize that my husband and I were meant to be like,
oh my God.
Like somehow you've always said,
well, of course you were.
So anyway, so that's my anecdote. I'm assuming that was Sumner that paid me the visit. And I'm sure that was
to get you to like start digging, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Because I've tried to dig and have found nothing. But my searchers are like, Nothing came up, and move along. So, you, the research queen, doesn't surprise me that you went deep. I'd love to read that article. Please send
I
it
will
to me.
send it to you. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating, Sandy. So yeah, so it was Sumner, right? That probably showed
I
up.
think so. And I have a feeling that Sumner was egged on by my husband's side of the family to show up so that I would
Yeah.
discover
Yeah.
this connection. So
Wow. See,
really,
that's the thing is like, that's what's always blows my mind is how full circle stuff can get, you know?
yes,
And how these kind of really discordant parts can line up, and the synchronicity just blows my mind constantly. It just blows my mind. That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I can't wait to read the article. I can't believe Sumner moved to Nashville.
yeah,
So was he married at the time?
yes.
Okay. So our grandmother was a widow, fairly young. So she was originally from Kalamazoo though, right?
No, St.
No?
Clair. Mhm.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow. All this family history, this news to me.
Right, because we had a father who liked to indulge in wine and then would spew interesting stories. So a lot of what I grew up
Wasn't the
thinking,
only one. He wasn't the only parent that used to do that. So
I grew up thinking certain things that were just, according to this article, not the case. But
interesting.
yeah.
That's so
So
fascinating.
anyway,
I can't
if
believe
that
that I had no idea he was a vet. I didn't know that Sumner was a veteran in World War One. I wonder
Mhm.
where he was deployed to. Did it say where he was deployed to?
if it did, I didn't make note of it. I just know that
Okay.
they were all sent to Europe in the in
Wow.
the army. Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. Absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. You're right. That
Yeah.
that is an anecdote that blows me away on
Yeah.
multiple levels. That's
Yeah.
so cool. That's so cool. Awesome sauce. All right, Sands. Okay, well, let's get to this anecdote, which I love. And
It's a case, not an anecdote.
sorry,
Right.
case.
Yeah.
Let's get to the case that I love. It's a little bit on the long side, but the details are, I think, important and absolutely fascinating. So, take it away, Sands.
Okay, so bear with me. This is a long case and it has a lot of big words. So on
Somehow I think you'll survive the big words, honey. You can
I'll
do
try.
it. Plugging
All
for
right.
you. You got this.
So so this past November 2021 marked the 50th anniversary of the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial airline history, the DB Cooper hijacking. And despite the passing of 5 decades, very little is still known to this day about the man behind the crime, including his real name. On Wednesday, November 24th, 1971, which was Thanksgiving Eve, a man in his mid 40s wearing a business suit with a black tie and a white dress shirt and carrying a black attache case approached the flight counter of Northwest Orient Airlines at Portland International Airport. He identified himself as Deanne Cooper and used cash to purchase a one-way ticket on Flight 305, which was scheduled for a 30-minute trip north to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, or SeaTac. With the flight only 1/3 full, Mr. Cooper readily secured a ticket for seat 18C, which was an aisle seat at the rear of the Boeing 727 aircraft. Once he had settled in for takeoff, Cooper lit a cigarette and ordered a bourbon and soda. Northwest 305 departed Portland on time at 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to 23-year-old flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Assuming the note contained a lonely businessman's phone number, Florence dropped the unopened note into her purse. Cooper then leaned toward her and whispered, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note was printed in neat, all capital letters with a felt tip pen. Because Cooper later reclaimed the note, the exact wording is unknown. However, Florence reported that the note mentioned a bomb and directed her to take the passenger seat next to Cooper. Once seated, Florence discreetly asked to see the bomb, and Cooper opened his briefcase long enough for her to glimpse 8 red cylinders, presumed to be dynamite, in 2 rows of 4. She also noticed a wire that attached the dynamite to a large cylindrical battery, and after closing the briefcase, Cooper stated his demands. He wanted $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. Florence promptly conveyed Cooper's instructions to the captain and co-pilot in the cockpit. And when she returned to the rear of the aircraft, she noticed that Cooper was now wearing dark sunglasses. Captain William A. Scott contacted Seattle-Tacoma Airport Air Traffic Control, which informed local and federal authorities about the unfolding hijacking. The captain then made an announcement over the intercom to the 35 other innocent passengers that their arrival in Seattle, would be delayed because of minor mechanical difficulty. Cooperating fully with the hijackers' demands, Northwest Orient's president, Donald Nyrop, authorized payment of the ransom. And from there, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound for almost 2 hours to allow enough time for Seattle police and the FBI to secure Cooper's 4 parachutes and $200,000 in ransom money, which was about $1.3 million in today's terms. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow recalled that Cooper appeared familiar with the local terrain. At one point, he remarked, "It looks like Tacoma down there," as the aircraft flew over that city. He also correctly mentioned that McChord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from SeaTac Airport. Tina also told investigators that Cooper wasn't nervous and in fact was thoughtful and calm throughout the ordeal. As the plane circled, he ordered a second bourbon and soda, paid his drink tab, and then attempted to give the tip to Tina with the change. He also requested meals for the flight crew during the stop in Seattle. Tina asked Cooper if he had a grudge with Northwest Orient, and Cooper replied, "I don't have a grudge against your airline, miss. I just have a grudge." FBI agents assembled the ransom money from several Seattle area banks, 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, most with serial numbers beginning with the letter L, indicating issuance by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And before packing it up for Cooper, authorities took a microfilm photograph of each bill. The FBI offered Cooper 4 parachutes from McChord Air Force Base personnel, but Cooper rejected the military issue parachutes and instead demanded 4 civilian parachutes with manually operating ripcords. This equipment was then secured from a local area skydiving school by Seattle police. Once Cooper was informed that his demands had been met, Northwest Flight 305 landed at Seattle Tacoma Airport about an hour after sunset in heavy rain. Northwest Seattle operations manager Al Lee delivered a knapsack full of cash and 4 parachutes to Tina Mucklow via the aft stairs. Once the delivery was completed, Cooper allowed all 35 passengers, plus Florence Schaffner and senior flight attendant Alice Hancock, to disembark the plane. As the refueling process was underway, Cooper outlined his flight plan to the cockpit crew: a southeast course toward Mexico City at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling the aircraft, at approximately 100 knots, which is 115 miles an hour, and at a maximum 10,000 foot altitude. The landing gear was to remain deployed in the takeoff landing position and the wing flaps lowered 15 degrees and cabin unpressurized. Cooper further directed that the aircraft take off with the rear exit door open and its air stair extended. When Northwest's home office objected that it was unsafe to take off with the aft staircase deployed, Cooper countered that while it was indeed safe, he would lower the air stair once the plane was airborne. First Officer William Ratzik informed Cooper that a second refueling would be necessary before entering Mexico. Cooper and the crew discussed options and agreed on Reno Tahoe International Airport as the refueling stop. At 7:40 p.m., Northwest 305 took off from SeaTac Airport, this time with only Cooper, Tina Mucklow, Captain Scott, First Officer Ratzik, and Flight Engineer Harold E. Anderson aboard. Unbeknownst to Cooper, 2 fighter jets from McChord Air Force Base followed behind the airline, one above it and one below it, out of Cooper's view. Once airborne, Cooper instructed Tina Mucklow to join the rest of the crew in the cockpit and remain there with the curtain closed. At approximately 8 p.m., about 20 minutes after takeoff, a warning light flashed in the cockpit, indicating that the aft staircase apparatus had been activated. Over the cabin intercom, the captain asked Cooper if he needed assistance. Cooper picked up the cabin phone and replied no, and that was the last communication with Cooper. The crew soon noticed a change of air pressure, indicating that the aft door was open. At approximately 8:15 p.m., the aircraft's tail section sustained a sudden upward movement, large enough to require trimming to bring the plane back to level flight. The duration of the flight was quiet, and the 727 jetliner landed at Reno Tahoe Airport sometime after 10 p.m. with the aft air stair still deployed. Captain Scott confirmed with air control that Cooper was no longer aboard, and after a 30-minute sweep by the FBI bomb squad, the cabin was cleared and the crew deplaned. FBI agents boarded the aircraft and retrieved 66 unidentified latent prints, Cooper's black clip-on tie and a mother of tie clip, and 8 filter-tipped Raleigh cigarette butts, which sometime after the hijacking, these cigarette butts were lost. Investigators also recovered 2 of the 4 parachutes Cooper had requested, one of which had been opened and 2 shroud lines cut from the canopy. In addition to the forensic evidence gathered above the airliner, authorities interviewed eyewitnesses in Portland, Seattle, and Reno, which produced a series of composite sketches of Cooper with and without sunglasses. Local police and FBI agents in each city questioned possible suspects. In Oregon, authorities identified their first person of interest, a man named D.B. Cooper, who had a police record for a minor infraction. Although this man was quickly ruled out as a suspect, a local reporter, James Long, who was rushing to meet his press deadline, confused the name of the eliminated suspect with that of the hijacker. A UPI wire service reporter republished the error, followed by additional media sources, and Dan Cooper became known as D.B. Cooper. Investigators divided their efforts between trying to determine where Cooper landed, following his parachute jump from the airplane, recovering the $200,000 in ransom money, and most importantly, identifying Cooper's true identity. In terms of the landing area, neither the Air Force fighter pilots saw Cooper exit the airline, either visually or on radar, and nor did they see a parachute open. But with the darkness of the night and limited visibility from the cloud cover, an airborne black-clad human figure could easily have gone undetected. Further, the precise search area of the landing point was difficult to define due to the differences in estimates of the aircraft's speed, environmental conditions along the flight path, and the length of time Cooper remained in free fall before pulling his parachute ripcord. Initial calculations placed Cooper's landing zone within an area on the southernmost outreach of Mount St. Helens near Lake Merwin. Ground search efforts focused on Clark and Coswell counties, and an aerial search was conducted along the entire flight path from Seattle to Reno, but the arduous search did not produce any trace of Cooper, nor of any of the equipment he presumed to have had with him when he jumped from the aircraft. Subsequent analyses indicated that the original proposed landing zone was grossly inaccurate, and the actual drop zone was likely southeast in the drainage area of the Washougal River. Despite the valley being thoroughly searched by civilians, there haven't been any discoveries traceable to the hijacking. Some have speculated that the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens could have obliterated any remaining physical clues. In terms of the ransom recovery, about a month after the hijacking, to recover the money, the FBI distributed lists of the bill's serial numbers around the world to law enforcement agencies, financial institutions, and businesses involved in large cash transactions. And then in early 1972, the serial numbers were released to the public. By Thanksgiving of 1974, no genuine bills had ever been recovered. However, on February 10th, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram, while vacationing with his family on the Columbia River at a beachfront known as Tina Bar, uncovered 3 packets of the ransom cash totaling $5,800. The bills had deteriorated from weather exposure, but were still securely bundled together by rubber bands. The FBI confirmed that the money was from the Northwest 305 hijacking, 2 packets of $120 bills each, and a third packet of 90, all arranged in the same order as when they were delivered to Cooper. Brian's discovery raised more questions than it answered. It was noted that the bills had disintegrated in a rounded fashion and were matted together, indicating that they had been deposited by river action, as opposed to having been deliberately buried. That theory supported the opinion that Cooper had not landed near Lake Merwin, and instead suggested that the drop zone was near the Washougal River, which merges with the Columbia River upstream from Tina Bar. While this theory seemed plausible, it did not explain the 10 bills missing from 1 packet, nor was there a logical reason behind why the 3 packets remained together, rubber bands intact, after separating from the rest of the money. In 1986, after a prolonged series of negotiations, the recovered bills were divided equally between Brian and Northwest Airlines insurer. The FBI retained 14 bills as evidence. Brian Ingram sold 15 of his bills at auction in 2008 for about $37,000. To date, this recovered money is the only confirmed physical evidence from the hijacking ever found outside of the aircraft. With respect to D.B. Cooper's identity, flight attendants Tina Mucklow and Francis Schaffner both described Cooper to be around 5 feet 10 inches tall, 180 pounds, in his mid-40s with close-set piercing brown eyes, black hair styled in a conventional cut, parted on the left, and an olive skin complexion. Agents theorized that Cooper's alias came from a popular French-language Belgian comic series featuring a Royal Canadian Air Force test pilot, Dan Cooper, who partook in parachuting throughout his adventures. Given that Dan Cooper comics were never translated into English nor imported to the US, it was speculated that Cooper had discovered the comic series during a European tour of duty. The FBI also derived from witness testimony that Cooper seemed to be familiar with the Seattle area and may have been an Air Force veteran. He recognized the city of Tacoma from the air as the jet circled Puget Sound, and he made an accurate comment to Tina Mucklow that McCord Air Force Base was about a 20-minute drive time from Seattle to Tacoma Airport. Both of these were obscure details that most civilians wouldn't know or comment upon. Adding to the theory that Cooper was familiar with piloting an airplane was Cooper's selection of the 727-100 aircraft to hijack. This type of plane was ideal for a bailout escape because of its aft air stair and the aftward location of all three engines. In addition, the 727 had the capability to fly in a constant, slow, low altitude flight without stalling, and the air stair could be lowered during flight by operating a single switch in the rear cabin, an activation that couldn't be overridden by the cockpit controls. Cooper's knowledge of these important design details suggested that he may have derived his knowledge from time in the military or the CIA. At the time of the hijacking, the CIA was using 727 airplanes to drop agents and supplies behind enemy lines during the Vietnam War. Cooper's ransom demand of 4 parachutes and eventual use was also telling. The FBI disclosed that Cooper had chosen the older of the 2 primary parachutes supplied to him rather than the technically superior professional sports chute, and that from the 2 reserve parachutes, he actually selected a dummy as an unsuitable unit with a sewn shut chute, which was intended only for classroom demonstrations. An experienced skydiver would have realized this dummy chute was non-functional. Cooper also maybe mistakenly used the cord from the functional parachute he jumped with to secure the money bag. The FBI concluded that no experienced parachutist would have jumped in the pitch black, rainy night at 172 mile-an-hour winds, temperatures around 15 degrees Fahrenheit, wearing loafers and a trench coat. Without proper protection and facing extreme temperatures, agents speculated that Cooper did not survive his escape and likely never even got his chute open. If, however, miraculously he did land safely, agents contended that survival in the mountainous terrain at the onset of winter would have all but been impossible without an accomplice stationed at a predetermined landing point, which would have required a precisely timed jump and cooperation from the flight crew. But there's no evidence that Cooper requested or received any such help from the crew, and nor is there evidence that he had any clear idea where he was when he jumped into the stormy, overcast darkness. Based upon that intel, FBI agents considered that Cooper may have been an Air Force veteran aircraft cargo loader and not a paratrooper. As an aircraft cargo loader, he would have had aviation knowledge and experience, including rudimentary jump training, but not necessarily sufficient knowledge to survive the jump that Cooper made. Between 1971 and 2016, the FBI processed more than 1,000 serious suspects, including assorted publicity seekers and deathbed confessors. These people included Kenneth Peter Christensen. In 2003, Kenneth's brother, after watching a documentary about the hijacking, became convinced that his late brother, who died in 1994, was Cooper. Kenneth enlisted in the Army in 1944 and was trained as a paratrooper. And while stationed in Japan with occupation forces in the late 1940s, he made occasional training jumps. After leaving the Army, he joined Northwest Orient Airlines in 1954 as a mechanic in the South Pacific and subsequently became a flight attendant and then a purser based in Seattle. While Kenneth smoked, liked to drink bourbon, and his age matched that of Cooper, he was 45 at the time of the hijacking, and a year after the hijacking, despite his modest salary, Kenneth bought a house in cash. He was not a match due to his physical characteristics. He happened to be shorter and thinner than Cooper, and the extensive skydiving experience that he had and coupled with lack of incriminating evidence ruled out Kenneth Peter Christensen. Richard McCoy was born in 1942 and died in 1974. He was an Army veteran who served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Following his military service, he became a warrant officer in the Utah National Guard and an avid recreational skydiver with aspirations of becoming a Utah State Trooper. On April 7, 1972, McCord boarded United Airlines Flight 855, which was also a Boeing 727 with aft stairs, and he boarded it in Denver, Colorado, brandishing what later proved to be a paperweight resembling a hand grenade and an unloaded handgun. He demanded 4 parachutes and $500,000 in ransom money. After delivery of the money and the parachutes at San Francisco International Airport, McCoy ordered the aircraft back into the sky, donned a flight suit, and bailed out over Provo, Utah. McCoy left behind his handwritten hijacking instructions and his fingerprints on a magazine that he had been reading during the flight. McCoy was arrested on April 9th with the ransom cash in his possession, and after a trial and conviction, he received a 45-year sentence. 2 years later, he escaped from Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary with several accomplices. McCoy was tracked down 3 months later in Virginia and killed in a shootout with FBI agents. Was McCoy a copycat hijacker, or was he also D.B. Cooper? FBI agents Bernie Rhodes and Russell P. Kalami wrote a book titled D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy, in which they present their theory that the two hijackers were actually the same man. Sheridan Peterson, born in 1926 and died in 2021, served in the Marine Corps during World War II and was later employed as a technical editor at Boeing, based in Seattle, where he wrote the flight manual for the Boeing 727-100 jetliner. Investigators took an interest in Peterson as a suspect soon after the skyjacking because of his experience as a smoke jumper and love of taking physical risks, as well as he had a similar appearance and age to Cooper. Peterson also worked at the Issaquah Skydive Center in the early 1960s, which is the same place that would later provide parachutes used by Cooper in his escape. Unlike descriptions of Cooper, however, Peterson had blue eyes, not brown, and Peterson was not known to have been a cigarette smoker. Cooper chain smoked on his flight, and Peterson often teased the media about whether he really was Cooper. Entrepreneur Eric Ullis, who spent years investigating the crime, said he was 98% convinced that Peterson was Cooper. But when pressed by FBI agents, Peterson insisted that he was in Nepal with his wife and family at the time of the hijacking, although he never offered any definitive proof that he hadn't traveled back to the US at the time of the hijacking. Robert Wesley Rackstraw, born in 1943, passed away in 2019, was a former Special Forces paratrooper, explosives expert, and a pilot with multiple aliases who served on an Army helicopter crew and other units during the Vietnam War. He came to the attention of the Cooper Task Force in February 1978 after he was arrested in Iran and deported to the US to face explosive possession and check-kiting charges. Although he was only 28 years old in 1971, investigators took note of Rackstraw's physical resemblance to Cooper, his military parachute training, and his criminal record. However, the FBI eliminated Rackstraw as a suspect in 1979 after no direct evidence of his involvement could be found. In 2016, Rackstraw reemerged as a suspect after the publication of a book, quote, The Last Master Outlaw by Thomas J. Colbert, who also produced a documentary for the History Channel on Rackstraw called D.B. Cooper Case Closed. Rackstraw's attorney called the renewed allegations the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and Rackstraw himself told People magazine, it's a lot of blank, and they know it is. Rackstraw purportedly lost his job over the 2016 investigations and went on to publicly state that he claimed to be the hijacker as a stunt. The FBI has declined further comment. And finally, William J. Smith. In November of 2018, the Oregonian published an article proposing William J. Smith, born in 1928 and passed away in 2018, of Bloomfield, New Jersey, as a suspect. Smith was a World War II veteran, having served in the U.S. Navy that included combat air crew training. After his discharge, he worked for the Lehigh Valley Railroad and lost his pension from the Penn Central Transportation Company's bankruptcy in 1970. Smith, who was 43 years old at the time of the hijacking, had a known grudge against the corporate transportation field. Adding to the theory in Smith's high school yearbook was a list of alumni killed in World War II that included the name Ira Daniel Cooper. And Smith's naval aviation experience would have given him knowledge of planes and parachutes. According to an analyst, aluminum spiral chips found on Cooper's clip-on tie could have come from a locomotive maintenance facility. The news article included a photo of Smith from the Lehigh Valley Railroad website, which showed a remarkable resemblance to the Cooper FBI sketches. The FBI has stated that it would be inappropriate to comment on tips related to Smith. In March of 2009, the FBI disclosed that Tom Kay, a paleontologist from the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture in Seattle, had assembled a team of citizen sleuths known as the Cooper Research Team to reinvestigate important components of the hijacking case. The team was able to find and analyze hundreds of minute particles on Cooper's tie using electron microscope. In November of 2011, Kay announced that the particles of pure unalloyed titanium had been found on the tie, which weakly suggested that Cooper might have worked in a metal or chemical manufacturing plant. In January of 2017, Kay reported that the rare earth minerals had also been identified among the particles from the tie. One of the rare applications for such elements in the 1970s was Boeing's supersonic transport development project, suggesting that Cooper was a Boeing employee. Other possible sources of the material included factories that manufactured cathode ray tubes, such as the Portland firm of Telluride and Tektronix. In the aftermath of all of this, on April 23, 2013, Earl J. Cosey, the owner of the skydiving school that furnished the 4 parachutes that were given to Cooper, was found murdered in his home in Woodinville, Washington, from blunt force trauma to the head. The perpetrator remains unknown, causing speculation that Cosey's murder is linked to the Cooper case. However, authorities do not believe that any such link exists and believe officially that burglary was most likely the motive for the crime. The FBI maintained an active investigation for 45 years after the hijacking, which did not result in any definitive conclusions about Cooper's true identity or fate. The crime remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history. My sources for this article include Wikipedia, DB Cooper, History.com, Who Was DB Cooper, and How Did the Infamous 1971 Skyjacker Vanish into Thin Air with $200,000 by Ella Morton, updated 5/13/15, and then updated again on 3/10/20. Considerable.com, 11 theories on the true identity of DB Cooper by Melissa Selenia, 8/26/19. And finally, opb.org, 50 years later, the mystery of DB Cooper still intrigues by Megan Cuthill, 11/24/21. So, do you have a clue as to who might have been DB Cooper?
This was a stumper. I will tell you, Sands. No name necessarily jumped off the page. I kind of went from when I was reading through the suspect list, I kind of went like reject really quick, and then to the next name, and there was like this feeling like maybe, and then another name, reject, and then another name, maybe. So I finally resorted to just pulling up pictures of the suspects, and the one that I just couldn't kind of dismiss was Robert Wesley Rackstraw. I don't know, there's just something there. There's a there. So I know he denied it. I know, is he still alive? No, he's not. He's deceased. Yeah.
He died in 2019.
Yeah. And I know he was young, only 28, but there's a photo of him, I think in a military uniform, and he does look significantly older than his 20 years. Bourbon is a little bit more of a mature drink for someone to have, but it could have been, there's no reason to say a 28-year-old doesn't like bourbon, bourbon and soda. This is the 1970s, right? So possibly, the other name that the other suspect that I was kind of like, was Richard McCoy. So he was the Army veteran who served two tour duties in Vietnam, and who tried to hijack, he did. He hijacked it. Yeah, successfully hijacked it, another 727. But I would look at his photo, and I was just like, I just didn't see him doing both. There was just this feeling of like, he definitely copied DB Cooper, right? Dan Cooper's modus operandi, but I really didn't feel like he committed both things. And also within a year of each other, that's a lot of risk to take in a short period of time when basically you've been given $1.2 million in that, the equivalent of $1.2 million in the 1970s, early 1970s. So the other interesting thing that you mentioned in the write-up is how calm and polite Dan Cooper was, right? Well, I stumbled on a YouTube thing, which was like, what's the difference between a psychopath, a narcissist, and a sociopath, right? And it was a great explanation. It was that sociopaths are made, psychopaths are born. All psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths, right? And the one thing in the physiology with psychopaths is that they don't have the same response to things that would cause shame or guilt. So they can be absolutely calm committing any kind of crime because it doesn't affect them like it does us. So like if you're driving and there's a cop is behind you, right? You get a little nervous, right? I do. Like there's a cop on my tail, turn signal, show the speed limit, stop at all stop signs. Okay. But
two
like
hands on the wheel.
10 and 2. Yes, 10 and 2. What time is it? 10 and 2. But a psychopath would just be completely unbothered by that. And that's why they can actually pass so many lie detector tests, is because they don't have the same heart rate, thudding or pupil dilation that, the rest of us do. I think that Dan Cooper was a psychopath. But I don't think he was a violent psychopath. Not all psychopaths are killers, right? A lot of them are doctors. A lot of them are CEOs. Because that's who you need, like at the top, someone who doesn't care who you're fired, doesn't care, right? So I just kept coming back to Rackstraw, and I just felt like that's the guy. But there's also this other element. And you know me, I'm not a huge conspiracy person at all, right? At all. If there's a hint of something in there, I'm skeptical. And then I dig in both in normal research and with my intuition. And I have to say, this feeling of this case with Rackstraw, I think there was more there than like meets the eye. I kind of do think that Rackstraw had a CIA background. I don't think he worked for Boeing, but I think he had a CIA background or a black ops. He was part of a black ops operation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he would be someone that would be quite comfortable in situations that would make the rest of us sweat bullets. So I think it was Rackstraw. I really do. I kind of think it was Rackstraw. And I think that the FBI was kind of thwarted from moving forward with an investigation of him because the CIA was like, hey, he was one of ours. Don't embarrass us. Don't let it be known that this is really the guy. We'll eat the money, kind of thing. That's my theory.
Well, do you think that there's so many questions, like, did he have an accomplice? Did he know where he was jumping?
No, yeah. I think he knew from the level of planning that went into committing the actual hijacking. There's no way he would have left to chance where he airdropped from, right? Like he had planned this to the nth degree. And so I don't think he'd be like, okay, and when they say, okay, here's the money and we get back in the air, I'm just going to go jump out of the plane wherever I want, and good luck, suckers, because he knew the terrain that he was jumping over, right? So I think he definitely knew where he wanted to jump out of the plane from. And I think, do you know if his, because he came on board with one suitcase, right? Or a briefcase or something?
A briefcase, yes.
I think there was something in the briefcase. I think there was something in the briefcase that had to do with allowing him to endure cold, wet weather. I think that there might have been even something underneath his clothing that was, thermal underwear or something along those lines that would have allowed him to kind of survive the conditions. So I think he had everything all planned out. They didn't recover his briefcase, did they? Yeah.
No briefcase, no money, nothing. I mean, there's nothing. I think that there's credibility to the idea that Mount St. Helens probably wiped out,
for sure,
that it wiped out any evidence.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't necessarily think that he actually walked away with the money. I don't know if he lost it or if he ended up keeping it, but why was the bundle of $5,800 found and nothing else? And the serial numbers were traceable. So
yeah, I think he had the money, but I think that $10,000 $20 bills is fucking heavy. Yeah. So I think that he probably in the briefcase had some sort of backpack. And
it was delivered in a knapsack to him, so he could have put it on.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was heavy, and I think he thought, well, I'll bury some of it here and then just retrace my steps and come get it again. That's my thinking. I really do think that he got the money and made out for it, made out for places unknown after that. So, and lived off it. I think that's my thinking. And I gotta kind of agree with Colbert. I think it was Rackstraw. Like, that's just kind of lighting up my radar. I could be wrong. He could be wrong. We could be wrong. But that's sort of my feeling. And that I really think the CIA intervening was like, stop investigating.
Well, I know I didn't present this as part of the story, but the lead FBI agent on the case, when they were looking at Rackstraw, pretty quickly dismissed Rackstraw as a suspect, and he
Wow.
was met with a lot of kickback or backlash from other
Yeah.
FBI agents who really felt that Rackstraw was a viable suspect.
Yeah.
So it did get shut down pretty quickly
Interesting.
and
Very
not
pretty.
necessarily revisited. So I think your theory that the CIA, intervened makes sense.
Mhm.
And the other really interesting thing out of this case was I was actually sharing this story with one of my sons. He's like, Mom, I don't want to hear the gory ones. So I was like, all right, I'll tell you about this one. I don't want to hear the gory ones anymore myself.
Yeah, me either.
But anyway, I was sharing it with him and he was really taken aback. Like, the guy just walked on the plane. And I said, yeah, the law has changed pretty quickly after these two hijackings, along with a couple others that happened, where you used to be able to walk up, tell someone your name and buy a ticket. And then they started to introduce the need for screenings for metal. They started introducing a demand for ID.
Yeah.
And now you're flagged if you want to buy an airline ticket, especially a one-way ticket using cash, you're flagged. It's not that easy to do anymore. So, our security has increased since the 70s, clearly after 9/11, it became very intense. But up until the late 60s, early 1970s, it's like walking on a bus. Here's my ticket and, thanks for playing. And
Right.
so
the other thing that jumped out at me, just to revisit Rackstraw again, was that in February of 1978, he was arrested in Iran and deported to the U.S. to face explosives possession and check kiting charges. I think that this was kind of the way that they got even with him. Do you know what I'm saying? When he was faced with those charges and then sent to prison where he then escaped, right? No, wait.
No, that was McCoy.
McCoy
was sent to prison and escaped.
Gotcha.
Rackstraw was never formally
No, he was
charged or
arrested
arrested.
February 1978 after he was arrested in Iran and deported to the U.S. to face explosives possession and check kiting charges. So I think that was a way of kind of
letting him know we know who you are.
We know who you are. Yeah, that's sort of my feeling. That kind of just feels fake to me that he was set up like that. So fascinating case, Sans. Thanks for deciding that was the one that we should look into. I will tell you, there's not like a super strong energy around one over the other. I kept going back between Rackstraw and McCoy. Yeah. But I just keep leaning a little bit more towards Rackstraw because there's this feeling of behind the scenes kind of machinations with some sort of government affiliated agency. So that's my thinking.
Well, McCoy also, sorry,
them.
I was just going to say that McCoy was known to have been in Las Vegas the day of the hijacking and was then was known to be with his family on Thanksgiving Day, celebrating Thanksgiving. So those were some of the reasons why they eliminated him. And he really was a focus because he, in 6 months later, pulled off a successful hijacking.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think he was just a copycat. That's my thing. Was like, wow, it worked for that guy. Maybe it'll work for me. And it did.
Exactly.
And it did.
With more money.
Right. Up in the ante. Okay, so tomorrow you and I are going to record another kind of not necessarily a psychic mystery podcast, but I've been working on predictions. The Facebook fan page is just full of when are the predictions? Well, they're coming. So I've been spending quite a few hours this weekend on them, trying to flesh them out, trying to narrow down the topics that I want to talk about. There's a lot, I think, coming up in the next 6 months. There's a lot that's been going on. There's a lot kind of coming up. Yeah. I know that there are a lot of you out there that are nervous and worried and a little panicked because it feels like the world is just continuing to kind of spiral down, but there's hope. So hang in there. We'll discuss predictions tomorrow in depth, and we'll toss that up on a podcast as well. It'll go out as a newsletter. So if you are hearing this podcast today, July 3rd, 2022, and want to sign up for the newsletter so that you can have it delivered to your inbox, you need to go today to victorialaurie.com and click on the join my newsletter thing, okay, to have your name automatically answered. I used to be like, well, send me an email and I'll add you to the list. Don't do that anymore, guys, because there were like hundreds last time and that took up like days of my time. So get on the list prior to, and if not, then get on the list for the next one. And I also posted to the Facebook fan page, Fans of Victoria Laurie, which is a fan page I didn't even start, but I'm on. I'll post them there, and we'll have the podcast tomorrow to discuss amongst friends. So yeah, so that's all we've got. If you've enjoyed our podcasts, thank you for continuing to comment. We love your comments. We read them all. Giggle about a lot of them. And Sandy's definitely the more popular of the two of us, which, I think is fitting. I think it's appropriate. So you weren't just a favorite child, you're also the favorite sibling. Oh. Anyway, yeah, so if you like our podcast and you're enjoying it, please click the subscribe button, hit the like button, and ring the bell. So you'll be notified of new podcasts, especially the one coming out tomorrow, for my predictions for the next couple of months, which probably, I'll be honest with you, I was going to do like 6 months, and there are some topics that I cover well into 2023 and others that I'm like, okay, I'm kind of hedging my bets. I think that this is heading in this direction just because there's so many variables still in play that it really hasn't settled on like where it will be in the ether. Especially where politics is concerned. So I'm probably going to do an amended version in October. So, but things like the housing market, there's a long purview of that. Things like the economy, there's a long purview of that. So the most important topics, I think, you'll have a general sense of what's coming down the pike over the course of the next six to 12 months. So, and if you'd like to sign up for a reading with me, please do. Lots of room on the calendar because it's summer. People love to like take a vacation from everything, every, I guess, appointment on their own personal calendars. So please head to victorialaurie.com and click on book an appointment with me, and I will look into what's going on with you and who on the other side wants to come through and say hello. I'm saving my anecdotes. I had a couple this week that were mind blown, really fantastic. One in particular, I can't wait to tell you all. But I loved, Sandy, I loved your anecdote. Thank you so much for sharing it. Send me the article. And that's about it, guys. Thanks for hanging out and listening. And thank you, Sandy. I love you, love you a lot. Don't say dinner. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks
All
all.
right. Bye, guys. Bye.